The Science of Self-Realization by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada has Learning the Science of the Soul as its first chapter. Seeing the Aim of Human Life is its first section. The problem of society is seen as the fact that those who are in charge, that those who are seen as the biggest influencers, are those who don't know the meaning and purpose of life. There are those who do know the meaning and purpose of life. And one thing that we can all admit is that we're each part of existence. But that doesn't mean we can claim to be the whole. That doesn't mean we can claim to be the divinity over the whole, or part of the divinity over the whole. At least not in an honest way can such things be claimed. We need to realize that humanity comes from a long process. And the way to truly be satisfied is through our relationship with the starter of the process. We are in an age of toil. We are in an age of Maya, illusion, moha, delusion. People being raised are not being raised through the divine message. And even outside of being raised, when they have the ability themselves, they are not consulting things themselves. Just like, to learn a trade, you would consult those who know about that trade, those who are in that trade. So likewise, we should seek out those who would operate these things. Now, how do we cross over nescience? How do we not fall into the spiritual suicide of neglect? We do that through continual movement, continual action, no matter how small, right? There's natural attachment within and out of ourselves. But when these material ways are made into spiritual ways, then the mysteries start opening to us. We can reach under that point of no return, right? That point that frees us from the false egos. We're not getting rid of our egos. We're just dropping the misassociation, the misdeeds, the misbelief, whatever you want to call it. Our distinction from the ignorant, our distinction from the foolish, our distinction from duality and any aspect of it is not just something that we can wave in front of others and say, this is our station that we are upon. That we are upon, a person could call it a black light. A light that's not these outer forms of illumination. A light that keeps us from the mere material existence. A light that establishes our supreme abode. That brings our personal spiritual existence towards the absolute spiritual existence. And just as our bodies have their limitations and flaws, so will we also have our flaws to deal with. And we can appreciate the benefit, happiness or otherwise, that we have. But we realize that our liberation, mukti, is not just that. The following of our bliss, as people will call it, it's not just some sociopathic thing that we're going through. Your original consciousness is Krishna consciousness, is the next section of this first part. Chaitanya Chartamrita Madhya 22 107. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kambunaya Sravanade Suddha Chitta Karya Udaya. There is something within each of us to awaken. Much like puberty awakens the desire between male and female. If we know about divinity, if we know about devotees, that should, or it can if we let it, awaken that within us. People speak of their material parents, their material benefactors, and certainly they are means, but ultimately divinity, that's what's in charge. And it's not just about our title of what religion we call ourselves either, what current, whatever, we're going beyond that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. "16 vibrations, just 3 words. Not something artificial, but something, if we allow it to change our consciousness, hypocrisy will fade. The spiritual masters of the world, the real ones, I'm not just talking prophets, but the real ones, will not make it about themselves. You've seen how in your typical Protestant and even Catholic church, they've turned things around and they're doing a display rather than you praying with them. And maybe you don't even know what the preacher looks like if you don't get in the first row or something. But the point is about connection to God. Srimad Bhagavatam 1-6 says, Savaye pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adokshaje ahayetuke apratehata yayatma suprasidate. The best social order gets us beyond motive, our known results, with our service of the divine. We are not loving the things or the reward, but we need to love without restraint. And all paths are not going to lead to the same cause. Bhagavad Gita, 1855, Bhaktya mamabhijanate. And only through devotional processes can we expect to understand. And if we don't have devotion, there are things that we won't be able to understand. Although the different forms of connection do have their benefit. And true discipleship will show itself in its eating, in its psychology. We can take things as they are. People focus on the symbolic and say, oh, they're going to set aside the literal. And the true scriptures, if they're conveyed as they are, then that would be sufficient. Chaturvanyam maya shrishtam guna karma vibhagasa. Bhagavad Gita 4:13 talks about the divisions of people according to their qualities and behaviors. And certainly, naturally, society does divide into such things as the intellectual or artistic priestly class, the soldiers and politicians, the goods class and the service class. Bhagavad Gita 5:18, Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gave hastine sone cha eva svapake cha pandita samadarsana. And through humility, true knowledge forms an equalness between the different classes of existent beings. And some people will say, oh, that's a little sin, that's a whatever. It's like, but if it's right or wrong to behave this way in this circumstance to this person, then that's what you do. You don't, set it aside, right? And we need to be important to care for our own duties, to have habits that consider the needs and the rights of others, not just something where, oh, well, I want it, I can do it, I'm going to do it. We're not psychopaths like that. And it's not about what the government and society decides is quite right either, Sakshadarit vena samasta sastrair uktas tatha bhavyata eva sadbih. And our honoring of spiritual leaders is a way of honoring divinity. And a spiritual leader, as previously said, is one who is actually bringing about and living the scriptures. It's not just, oh, you follow their opinion. It's not about their mere opinion. It shouldn't be merely their opinion. Now, if they say, this is my conclusion based on this, okay, and we can understand divinity from different angles. Purusha. We understand through form. This universe has form, and we're understanding through that form. The prakriti, the energy. But divinity, of course, is the original. What we can mundanely witness is not even spiritually. And, we must act sometimes on faith. Not everything is what we have or are going to witness. And so, real advancement means knowing God is our next section here. And one of the things that needs to be done is the spreading of the divine name. People act like, people already know that stuff. It's like, to some extent they do. Like people say, well, Christianity exists. And now Krishna consciousness movement, Vedic stuff, it's like, well, people do hear, but what do they actually know? So some stuff needs to be spread. Krishna is all attractive. There's certain images and stuff that people will see, but that's what we need to remember. The all attractive. The Hari, the presence, the potency, Vishnu, the main, Rama, again, the moving aspect of it all. So basically the omnipresence of the light and sound and other meanings that you can attach to those words. Vishnu Purana 6547, Aesvaryasya Samangrasya Viryasya Yasasah Sreyah Jnana Vairagyayos Chayeva Shanam Vaga Etingana Vishnu. That's the Vishnu Purana. And we remember that the Supreme Being is the one who is full in the opulences, the best of the best in any worthy quality. But people, of course, focus on the strength, the fame, the wealth, the knowledge, the beauty, and the not having need. I saw a video, this guy was talking about how he couldn't be Muslim because he doesn't want to fulfill any divine need, and the divine, the need is the person. It's not that God has needs. It's not that God has limit, and we don't necessarily, and, yes, even sex, even war can serve divinity. Vairagya, the full renunciation, doesn't mean that we have to not take part in aspects of life. It's just we take part in them with spiritual consciousness. And that, of course, implies spiritual principles, right? Bhagavad Gita 8:20. Parastasmat tu bhavonyo vyakto vyaktat sanatana yah sa sarveshu bhutashu nasyatsu navinasyate. And people talk about the maintaining what's pre-existing and what's after existing. So there's certainly those functions that are eternal. But when we say that creation, our speech of God, is a divine quality, that's not saying that the universe is co-eternal with God, or that because different universes, right, or that a particular scripture is co-eternal with God. That's not really what we're saying, right? And there is a sense where things are as they are, and that the different stages of existence that things go through are, that changes, but something else doesn't change, right? Bhagavad Gita 14:4. Sarvayoneshu kaunteya murteya sambhavanteya tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradahpita. Understand that every type of life, son of Kunti, are brought about because of birth into material nature. And that, of course, divinity is the source of that. Bhagavad Gita 7.3 Manushyanam sahasreshu kasched yatate siddhaya yatatam ape siddhanam kaschan mam vete tattvatah. And it may be very rare, a percentage of a percentage, that sort of stuff, that you'll find somebody that is actually working to perfect themselves. And just a sense of becoming perfect, becoming self-mastered, that is not quite the same thing as being God-conscious. And so merely out of 1,000, out of 1,000, out of 1,000, again, it's not the same thing. And we can advance. We can advance to the sense that a sort of knowledge, maybe not empirical, but a sort of knowledge will come to us that there is a God, that there is a real God. Reincarnation and beyond. There's a Bhagavad Gita verse, Na jayate mreyate vakarachin nayam bhutva bhaveta vana bhuyah ajo nityah sasvato yam purano nahanyate hanyamane sarire. Soul isn't what is born or dies at any time. It doesn't come into being like that. And it's not going to come into being like that. It's as if it's the unborn, eternal thing. Primal, then after. And it doesn't end. It doesn't end just because the body is no longer its vehicle. And so we need to distinguish between the vessel and the real living entity. And some things that will happen to the vessels will be unavoidable. And it won't be merely, punishment. But sometimes things are opportunity, that through that difficulty in our response to it, it is a way of us further progressing. And, yeah, we are trapped in the physical body, and that means that we do have to follow what the government orders us to do or not do at times, right? And when we're talking about spiritual consciousness, it's not going to be limited to our sense of a particular group or not. You can take part in something whether or not you are an authentic member or not. And sometimes what we can do is we can find people who are ready to receive physical copies of texts and stuff that will actually use them. Now, sometimes this will be through sales. Sometimes this will be, we got to enable ourselves to be able to give. Sometimes, you acquire a separate copy of something and it's, and yeah, you could be charitable in other ways too, helping people out physically. But their responsibility is their responsibility. If you help them to do that, you help them to turn from what they shouldn't have been upon. There's, merit about that. And of course, we acknowledge our real physical parents as much as we use metaphors of father and mother and all that sort of stuff for divinity. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo vate tattvata tyaktva deham hunar janmana ete mam ete sojuna. And if you know about transcendence, if you know that things are beyond the worldly appearance of any particular sent one, if you know that about their activities, then you attain to the same eternal abode, O Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita 4:9. And we may follow the evidence, but that's not the same thing as speculation. So we can't just speculate and say, this is a divine name, this is, how we know God, that we just make up a better story than other people. Because it's not about, you use your intelligence, but it's not, about who's smarter or stronger or whatever. You develop those means if you have those means, but, that doesn't lead you to truth in the way, for example, that in what they call Zoroastrianism, a person is upon truth. The Hatma Buddha, we don't operate on that intelligence of being the vessel. It's a mirror. There's a bunch of Buddhist sayings that a person can refer to, but some of them are quite vague, and you have to spend years trying to figure out what it means, especially if no one explains it to you. But then again, maybe it takes years because somebody explained it to you for you to actually figure it out. And the value in things is in how we can use them at the time. And what we're trying to cultivate is called sraddha, or faith. So, how does that lead you towards actually being good? Truth and beauty? Well, there's a difference between need to know, need to have, need to witness, and what you might think, right? And truth and beauty, of course, aren't the same thing, because you may like something that is bad for you and hate something that is good for you. And of course, there is the reworking your pathways and stuff towards what is good for you. Honestly, there was food that I shouldn't have been eating, probably my whole life, but I was raised in this culture, that at first, when you quit, you crave it. And when you realize that, it's probably better to live without painkillers or whatever, no matter how much the doctors tell you, whatever, at first you crave it. You crave it like food. You may even be shaking on and off for weeks. Well, I still shake, but you know what I mean. There was a different, separate shaking and different, going through withdrawals and stuff like this. But that doesn't mean, you just restructure yourself. There are certain nutrients that can shut off, or withdrawals that can realign your nutritional wants, your other wants in life. So you need to rework these. And of course, in terms of beauty, the other gender, and other aspects, people have a different sense of these things. And so what draws our attention is what draws our attention. But there is a relative truth that can kind of, gear us towards some things at some times. And relevant inquiries. Of course, we know through the Western tradition about not the needless questioning. Not the questioning that's going to make things stricter or delay our fulfillment of commandments or is just brought up for doubt. This is not the inquiries that we should be making. We need to dispel our doubts, yes, but, what our questions should focus on is where our life's going. Our life beyond this body. How we are preparing for that. Perhaps, the spiritual knowledge of that afterlife. What's the case when people have clues that they may have a specific period of life that they have left, right? And the Srimad Bhagavatam, as I intend to make comments on all, at least the 10 cantos, probably I'm going to get a hold of 11 and 12 in print, right? I've made comments on 11 and 12 in a more broad sense, but you know what I mean? They're a type of Sariraka Sutra, are a commentary scripture, so they're a broad thing, and the Puranas are thought of in that way. At the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, we have Athato Brahma Jijnasa, calling for the asking about the supreme being. That's what we should be asking about. And we should know how special and how rare our opportunities are in the human body. And we should know the difference between the human and the other animals. And there's the Grhamadi and the Grhastha. So the Grhastha asrama is this spiritual family life, or it could be, right? But the Grhamadi is the one who makes things about their material life. And so they fall into vices as a result of the material life being the thing. They think, oh, maybe I can get away with it in this life, so therefore and of course the sannyasi is the person who's lived the totally renounced life outside of the family life. The Srimad Bhagavatam 2.1.5 Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavani Svaro Hare Srotavya Kirtitavyascha Smartavyas Chatabayam. The descendant of Bharata, basically, technically, the reference to Indians in that area, and by that we mean Pakistan and stuff too, Bangladesh or other countries included in that phrase. But anyways, it's the duty of the mortals to ask about, to witness to express, and reflect upon the divine personality. As the controller, as totally the best in everything that's worthwhile, and who can undo the conditions And of course, we use the chants and we make the right questions so that we can have the best of freedom in this life. And the soul research, well, there's the question, where's the soul or spirit? Where's it from? Where's it going? And of course, a lot of that operates on belief. There seems to be a difference, though, with the body. It's rather subtle, and we do tend to notice things as a person dies. But of course, there is a light beyond this light, heat, moisture, and magnetism that people focus on when they're judging you on your auras. And we start off in the best of positions. And the point is to maintain it, especially after innocence. And we're not trying to, there's suffering that comes about when we try to stop nature from going its course, whether that's our life or otherwise. Now, people can be kept alive. There can be weird processes nowadays to produce children or to continue a strain of code of life. But the point is still brought home that there's a limit to the mundane science, to the mundane way. A limit that keeps people fallen, that makes them fallen. But we can bring ourselves out again. We can be one that knows there's something else. We can make the authentic search, live the authentic life, and find ourselves a further, pull that keeps on pulling us further and further in our progress, better and better towards our return to divinity.